Hi friends, welcome to the channel. I am so thrilled to be filming this video and I hope that you will enjoy it, and I am absolutely looking forward to getting some feedback or some of some opinions on what you guys think about some of the recommendations that I'm going to make in today's video. Today, I am going to talk about how to start taking yourself seriously. I think that it is absolutely important to, as early on as you can, to start taking yourself seriously, or just a little more seriously than you have been, as early as early as possible. I literally don't think that anyone is ever too young to start taking themselves, their goals, their dreams, and their ambitions seriously, right? So, as soon as possible. If you have not thought about this, then this is, I guess, a good time to think about it. So, regardless of what age you are, you literally could be 5, and I know that you won't be on this channel if you are 5, but if that's how early you start taking yourself and your goals and ambitions seriously, good for you. So it's never too early, right? But then some of us start thinking about these subjects like at a later age. You find yourself in your 30s and you're like, oh my God, I guess maybe it's time that I take myself a little more seriously. Maybe you are in your 20s, right? At that point, someone could go, oh, okay, maybe you are a little later than the 5-year-old who took him or herself serious from age 5. But you know what, friend? You have arrived at a point where you are now thinking of, something like that. And that's good enough, right? So the important thing is that you are there, right? So what does that look like? That looks like thinking more about, being more conscious and doing things intentionally, right? So where do you see yourself a few years from now? Or maybe that is a little, maybe that is a question that's a little too complicated for many, right? You can start small, how would you like your daily routine to be like, right? What type of person would you like to be? Not even long term, but just like the short term. Like, how would you like to dress? How would you like to interact with others? What do you see, your day going like what would make you, what is a good day to you, right? What would count as a good day to you? The activities that you would be doing for you to consider that you have had a good day, right? So those are some of the questions that you start to ask, because when you start asking those questions, you're not having that day that is, a fantastic day yet, right? And not every day will be that day, right? So that would be like, oh my gosh, I am expecting that as soon as I start taking myself seriously, every day will be a perfect day. That's not what I'm saying. But if you could think of a perfect day, what would that day look like, right? What would that day look like to you? And something that you really have to keep in mind is, don't worry so much about what everyone else is doing. People are different. Allow yourself to be different. Allow yourself to just think about what actually does work for you. And it's okay that other people have their routines, They have, like their ideas of what a fantastic day in life looks like. But you are supposed to think about that for yourself too, based on everything that you have learned so far, and knowing yourself as much as you know yourself, right? What do you think is like, like a good day? What types of activities would you be doing? Not what your neighbor is doing, not what your friends are doing, because they're not the same as you. They're not the same as you, so what works for them will not necessarily work for you. And like there's a lot of people who feel like they are underperforming because they are looking at their like friends and what their friends are up to, and they're just like, oh my gosh, I don't think that I have enough activities on my to-do list, because all my friends have so many activities on their to-do list, right? But then you don't know if your friends, like like part of what they see themselves as is being more social, having a busy schedule. Maybe that's not you. Maybe you're not a social person. Maybe you don't like to be, like busy, right? And so those are the times that you're like, all my friends actually have so many things on their to-do list, and it makes them feel better. But for myself, I actually don't have as many things on my to-do list. I just have the essentials, and I prioritize my rest. I prioritize my time, like in just relaxing, and that adds as much value to my life as like the value that's added to like my social friends when they go outside and socialize, or when they are just like like ticking boxes on their daily to-do list, right? So maybe you're not that type of person, right? And that is part of taking yourself seriously. You start thinking more about what actually does work for you, not what everyone else is saying, right? So not what everyone else is saying and doing, but you have actually taken time to think and go, I have tried different types of activities. I have tried having like like busy days, and I've tried having slow days, and I love my slow days. And so I will put my essentials, and I'll get my essentials done. And then maybe if I really, really feel like, like I would actually just like to be busy, and it will actually make me feel like I'm doing something great with my life, then it's like, okay, I'll add a few extra things. But because you take yourself seriously, you don't even feel guilty. You don't even feel guilty for taking that time in, for taking that, like having those slow days, because you're just like, you know what? I know myself. I know what works for me, and I know that I have gotten like, like my essential work done, right? And so that is one of the things that I recommend for when, like how to start taking yourself seriously, or, like when you're ready to start taking yourself seriously. My second recommendation is put together a budget. I genuinely am now a huge believer in that, like, like nothing gets you to like, like gets you on the road to taking yourself seriously more than like, like trying to put together a budget, right? And so, like when you actually get your budget down, like correctly, your first budget that you ever put together looks like a complete joke, right? But I really think that trying to put together a budget is like one of the most difficult things that we get to do, right? Especially when we are beginners. And I really consider, like, I am like a beginner at budgeting, and just seeing how difficult it is to actually try and, like, stick to a budget and try to get my mind off of things that I want in the immediate moment, because I have to try and, as much as possible, try to stick to the budget that I've set for myself. Honestly, it is proving to be a task that is so difficult, so that my approach towards, like, the whole thing is more, let me put away money to save, right? Rather than even trying to stick to a strict budget, because I'm just like, oh my gosh, I see so many things that I want to buy, and it's so hard to say no, right? It's so hard to say no. It's almost like the hallmark of maturity to be able to say no to all this frivolous spending, right? To be able to say, honestly, I don't need this product that I'm going to buy. It can wait until next month when I have extra money to spend. That is so difficult to do. That is so difficult to do. And the sooner you start doing that, the better it is for you, right? Because then when you have a budget, you are actually able to, like, like, predict your spending. You are able to put together, like, like, you're able to put away money for your savings, and so you have money for a rainy day, right? Like, that just makes, like, for me, like, it makes me feel so mature, right? It makes me feel so mature. I feel like I actually can plan for the future. The other day I was joking with my friends, right? And, well, actually, you know what? It was a joke when I first started, and then halfway through I'm like, guys, this is not even a joke, right? Because I'm like, when I meet men after putting together a budget, right? I'm like, oh my gosh. So I guess if this man is, depending on what age you are, right? So some of you are maybe a little too young to be expecting that the men who are your love interests should have their own homes, and so, like, should be taking care of themselves, right? But suppose that you are at that age, right? And so I was talking to my friends, and I was like, you know what? After putting together, like, like, trying to put together a little budget, I'm like, when I meet a man and I'm like, let me go and take a look at his fridge, let me go and take a look at his freezer, and if it's well stocked, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is looking like a really good man for me, because I'm going, this man is mature enough to budget for himself, enough to have a whole bunch of yummy food in the fridge that is, like, available for I don't know how long. Maybe, like, like, he has stocked up for the next 2 weeks, or for, like, a month. But you're looking at his fridge and it's well stocked up, and it's like, oh my God, you know what? That is husband material. That is a man that is actually able to take care of me, right? And so these are things that you start thinking about when you put together a budget for yourself, or you start thinking about saving. They don't come to your mind when you are not doing, like, like, when you're not doing something like that. But as soon as you start doing, like, things like that, you start going, wow, I would have never thought to check a man's freezer, right? A man that I'm interested in, or even if he lives with his parents, to just go, wow, this man has actually stocked up on his lunches. I'm quite impressed by that, right? And so it's little things like that that you're just like, you don't notice them until you start taking yourself. So I really feel like putting together a budget is one of the things that says like official adult. Like, I feel like you even get married and you don't have a budget. But the day that you and your spouse put together a budget, you're like, oh my gosh, it's now official. We're actually growing into mature adults. We're actually growing into mature adults. And so you can do a whole bunch of fun things in terms of your budget, especially if you have a spouse too, right? So budgeting can be so boring, but honestly, you can try and make it fun, right? You can, like you can go, wow, if we actually stick to our budget, we're going to buy ourselves these snacks. If we stick to our budget, we're going to do these activities, right, that are not our normal everyday activities, but they are rewards because we stuck to the plan. That is the budget that we planned. Or I guess maybe you're actually consistently putting away money for savings, right? And you are consistently doing it. And so you're like, oh my gosh, let us reward ourselves. And so you reward yourself, but you honestly can just do a whole lot of, like different exciting things with your budgeting. But I really, really recommend that you start thinking of putting together a budget for yourself when you are ready to start taking yourself seriously. My third recommendation is that you consciously start to work on your relationships and make sure to negotiate like the best possible outcomes for yourself, right? So as you're getting older, you start to realize that you have a limited amount of time and resources. That means that you can no longer just spend your time with just anyone, right? I mean, of course you can, but then you really want to save your resources and your time so that you can spend them on people like the people who mean a lot to you and who also reciprocate and give back when you give to them. Right? So that's when, like they start going, now you're weeding out your friends and you're, like actually going for value and letting go of the friendships or relationships that just do not carry much weight. Right? And so, like, the relationships that you have in your life are very important in shaping, like the type of person that you're going to be and the type of life that you are going to have. Keeping that in mind, that means that honestly, you should try as much as possible to get essentially, well, I mean, obviously, like we're wired to always try to get the best outcomes for ourselves, right? And so going into going into the whole idea of negotiating in terms of your relationships with like your friends, your spouse, your family members, with that mindset, you're like, okay, so I want to know that I am giving value, right? But I also want to be receiving as much value as possible. Right? And so as you're maturing, you start going, I am not going to allow my friends to use me or the people around me to use me when they're not giving anything back to me. Right? That is supposed to be your mindset. So if it's a relationship, if it's just going out to volunteer for a cause that you care about, or you're helping a stranger, that's okay, right? Like, so in those cases, it's okay for you to volunteer without expecting anything back. That's why it's called volunteering. But in terms of your family, right, you are supposed to be getting quite a lot back, right? You're supposed to be getting a lot of value So you invest in your spouse, you invest in your family, and sometimes, like, the return won't necessarily be apparently as much as what you are giving, but it has to be enough for you to be saying, I feel that it's worthwhile for me to keep working on this relationship, right? Because as you're maturing and you start to take yourself seriously, you start expecting more out of others, right? You start expecting more from others. You don't allow people to, like, walk all over you or disrespect you in a way that you're just going, you know what? I think that my spouse has actually just decided to be inconsiderate. He or she could have done better, but they chose not to. Or I am just not on their priority list. So this is something that he or she could have easily corrected if I was high on his priority list, but I am not, right? And so to be able to actually sit down and think of those things and communicate them, right, to the people that you are having relationships with, right? You sit down and you say, I have certain expectations. I now know what it's like to be in a healthy relationship. I now know what to reasonably expect from my family, and I know what it feels like to be abused, right? I know what it feels. I know not just what it feels like, what it looks like to be abused or taken advantage of. And since, you're now being mature and learning to communicate, when you observe something like that, you take action, right? You take action and you go, hey, I have certain expectations, like in terms of a relationship. And I feel like I really am not, I feel like I'm being taken advantage of, and that I'm giving where I'm not receiving. And maybe we can talk about it, right? And maybe, there's some things that we can work on to fix that, right? So these are the types of conversations you start to have when you start taking yourself seriously and you start consciously, thinking of things like that and actually working on them, right? But when you don't take yourself seriously, you just let people treat you anyhow, and you don't think that you really should do something about it, or you should tell them that that's not behavior that you will accept, right? So someone is mistreating you, or they are disrespecting you, or they are abusing you, and for whatever reason, right? You either have a low self-esteem, or maybe you are just so busy that you just don't even notice these types of things, right? And that is just as concerning, because when you are not paying attention to things like this, they pile up, right? And so it's like a to-do list that's just, you're just adding things on there, but you're not doing anything on your to-do list. But these are all very essential, right? These are all very essential. And so they are not the types of tasks that just automatically disappear. They are the type of tasks that if you have not worked on them for years, well, they will still be there waiting for you to work on them, right? So that's why you have to start thinking of things like this consciously. But this happens when you start to take yourself seriously, you start to have expectations, and you actually communicate your expectations to your loved ones, to your family, to your spouse, right? And you go, I guess, yeah, I have certain expectations, and I really want to feel that I am in a healthy relationship. And right now I don't feel that way. Maybe we can talk more about it. I don't know. Maybe you feel the same way too, right? And maybe I need to adjust certain things, right? So that shows a certain level of maturity, because you're not just assuming that it's the other person, you're also giving them, like the space to maybe express themselves, because maybe they feel the same way too, right? And so as you are taking yourself more seriously, you start to take others seriously too. You actually take their feelings seriously, and like when they communicate them and you feel like they make sense to you, you're like, okay, that is interesting. I will work on that. Or maybe, I don't agree with that, right? And so you start communicating to your friends, to your loved ones, in a way that they can sense that they actually have to take you seriously, because you're taking yourself seriously. And so it's like, okay, some things will change about our relationship, because I'm maturing, and I'm guessing that, like your friends are maturing too, your spouse is maturing, and so you have to start taking yourself seriously. I really think that working on your relationships is, especially if you're like, like someone that is social, someone who gets a lot of value from, like the relationships that you have, right? You really have to work on things like that. Otherwise, honestly, those are like relationships that are not healthy, are some of the biggest like downfalls for most people, right? So a serious individual, or a person that's learning to take themselves seriously, has to absolutely work on their relationships. They have to work on their relationships. And like relationships are about compromise and negotiating. You always have to actually have your negotiating hat out, and you're like, you know what? It's okay to actually think of it as negotiating, because I'm supposed to try and get, like the best outcome for myself. And also, I know that I can't take advantage of my loved ones, because they have to be happy too for them to keep staying as loved ones, right? So you can't take advantage of your loved ones, because if they are not happy, then they stop being loved ones, right? But these are the types of ideas you start thinking of when you actually sit down and take yourself a little more seriously, right? So those are some of my recommendations that I had prepared for this video. I really hope that like you have learned something from it. I would like to find out if you guys have any of your own recommendations, or if you have any comments. So like just feel free to like like let me know what you guys are thinking, and I don't know what you think about some of these recommendations. But other than that, I hope that you will have a fantastic week, and I am looking forward to making another video for you guys. And yeah, so guys, it's never too early to start taking yourself seriously. Never too early. But don't forget to subscribe, and yeah, I'm looking forward to making the next video.